In 2007, not long after the release of Halo 3 and in the aftermath of Bungie leaving Microsoft, there was a period of time where the future of Halo post-2010 was unknown, but Microsoft didn't want to call it quits with its biggest moneymaker, especially during their lucrative run on the Xbox 360. So, while Bungie worked on the spin-off titles, some key managers and art directors came together internally and made 343’s, a completely new development studio meant to focus entirely on the Halo franchise. From developing games to producing spin-off works, all in an attempt to make future Halo projects feel cohesive. And the studio is named after 343 Guilty Spark for some reason. I really want to know whose idea that was, actually. The transition between the two studios, while not easy, was smoother than angry fans make it out to be. A story bible was created through collaboration between the teams, and some key Bungie staff even went on to 343 in order to continue working on the series, like Frank O'Connor, who was promoted to franchise development director. I totally didn't have to look that up. The studio's first game would technically be the anniversary remaster of Combat Evolved in 2011, a joint project with Saber Interactive, but I don't really want to talk about that just yet. Instead, this new team's first true step began in 2009 with the development of Halo 4. What began as a studio of 12 to 13 people quickly grew to 200, then 350. Unsurprisingly, Halo 4 quickly became Microsoft's most expensive game ever made, and considering the expectations of this as a sequel to one of the most successful, critically acclaimed games of all time, it's completely understandable why this amount of money and work was put behind it. The stakes were at an all-time high. Bungie left the trilogy with a somewhat conclusive ending, with only the legendary ending offering even a hint of what the franchise's future could possibly be. How do you try to capture that same energy with no roadmap, and an almost entirely new group of developers, some of whom have had no history or even interest in the franchise, while also attempting to offer something new, especially when the last main installment was now 5 years ago, and a vocal portion of the fans weren't even keen on Bungie's later decisions with the series? Can a Halo game even work in the 2010s? Beyond existential issues, the actual development itself had its fair share of hiccups as well. From the project switching creative directors in 2011 over creative differences, to the difficulties of managing project pipelines with this massive amount of people working on one game, to the roles of Chief and Cortana almost being recast, and to the studio having difficulty designing the new enemy faction, the Prometheans. Regardless of your feelings on 343 as a studio or Halo 4 as a final product, this was not an enviable position to be in. With less than 3 years to get one of the most anticipated sequels ever out of the door for its November 2012 release, and you can almost feel the game itself begin to buckle under the pressure. After replaying Halo 4 for the 5th time just for this video, I have to say that this is an entirely mixed bag for me. Halo 4 is simultaneously one of the most conceptually interesting Halo campaigns, while also being one of the most underwhelming in gameplay. There's a lot here that I like, mainly the story between the Chief and Cortana, but there's also decisions that make no sense whatsoever. The complete lack of presence from the main villain, the very strict hallway-esque game design, the stilted set pieces, I could go on. As a matter of fact, that's sort of the entire point here. The story takes place 4 years after Halo 3. Chief is woken up by Cortana to discover that their ship is being invaded by the Covenant of all people, which is weird given that they had a truce at the end of Halo 3, only for all of them to crash onto a Forerunner planet and accidentally release a being known as the Didact, who plans to destroy Earth. And yeah, there's some other moving pieces as well, but that's really about it for the narrative. I have a lot to say and criticize about Halo 4's campaign, but I will say that the opening hour is a very good vertical slice of what the game is, both good and bad. Such as the odd decision to begin the game with a cutscene of Dr. Halsey being interrogated. It's a scene that directly lays out Master Chief's internal struggle in Halo 4, how he's stuck between being a man and a machine, as well as a facet of a bygone era, with little to no subtlety. I say it's weird because Halsey never shows up in the main campaign, only in the Spartan Ops side mode, so her focus here feels a bit odd. I understand that 4 was written as the first part of a trilogy. Getting Cortana back to Halsey is Chief's main goal in this game, and she does play a bigger part in 5. But this scene being the very first image that we see of this new era for Halo is weird. I truly believe that the scene was solely added to introduce players who only played the numbered installments, and thus skipped Reach, to who Halsey is so they aren't confused by her mention in the main story. As a quick catch-up to make the universe feel cohesive, it's fine, but as an introduction to 4 is a standalone story, it's awkward and takes away from the actual opening of the game. The first few missions seem to be going for something akin to Combat Evolved. You come out of cryosleep on a ship that's being attacked by the Covenant. You and Cortana have to escape, you crash land on a new planet, and you have to rendezvous with the UNSC as you discover the main villain's plan. Part of me feels a bit exhausted by the prospect of reminiscing on the first game now in 2026, especially with the second remake of Combat Evolved on the horizon, but it's somewhat understandable here to smoothly transition both the players and the dev team into this new era by revisiting what works. And most importantly, as an actual game, 4 mostly plays like Reach. There's abilities, sprint, and even assassinations return. That last one doesn't really make much sense in this context though. However, I do appreciate that if sprint is going to continue being in these games, that it is an intrinsic ability that is a part of the Chief's moveset, and not another ability that has to be traded for something else like a bubble shield. Although, the abilities in 4 do feel incredibly useless this time around. Active camo has never appealed to me since it only works when you don't shoot, which is the antithesis of the fucking game. That's just a Halo problem, not a 343 issue. The thruster pack doesn't push you far enough, the hard light shield is and Promethean vision is only given to you once in the entire campaign, and is meant to offer you vision in a foggy environment, except all the Prometheans already have glowing lights that make them easier to see in the first place, so using this skill sort of messes with the atmosphere. These abilities clearly felt like an attempt by 343 to shake up the game, but it ends up feeling like something that was simply here because previous games did it. I'm sure some of these abilities feel like they have a useful place in multiplayer, but just not so much here in the campaign. However, possibly one of the most controversial additions that 343 did was change Halo's art style. Yeah, I'll be the first to say that the new look is something new, to say the least. I don't think Anniversary did a good job of establishing 343's new art style, but looking at 4, at the very least it's easier to tell what the game is going for. Solely on a technical scale, the original Halo 4 for the 360 still looks great 14 years after its release. I get that I said this a lot during this era of the franchise, but I truly cannot believe that this is an Xbox 360 game. The head of 343 Industries, Bonnie Ross, wanted 4 to be a launch title for the Xbox One, which would release just 1 year later in 2013. And while I ultimately do think that that would have been the better business decision to give the team more time, and it also would have made more sense financially to help sell Xbox Ones at launch, in retrospect, it at least feels like a fitting send-off for the franchise's 5-year run with the console, a period that most fans would look at as the golden age of Halo. However, when it comes to my personal tastes, I do not like the way that Halo 4 looks. Not at all. He stinks. I don't like him. As I said in my video on Halo Reach, Bungie were already skewing towards realistic graphics and subdued color schemes themselves. But 343 truly pushed 4 to the next step, and it is one too far. Halo 4 is a game that's visually too busy. Everything has panels and layers to a comedic degree. The desaturated color palette from Reach returns here, and now Chief's suit barely looks green unless it's under direct lighting. The Covenant completely lacks any color and can easily blend into backgrounds. The Prometheans try to have a simplistic look with a primary silver color along with accents of orange or blue, but they still manage to also look muddy. UNSC soldier designs lack any simplicity and now just look like random sci-fi guys. Plus, this is the point where the Cortana design reaches critical mass because 343 just made her naked, with anatomically correct breasts. And people began to notice. Just listen to this Forbes article. The Master Chief is back, and Cortana is with him every step of the way to keep him abreast of the situation. There's some extremely exciting action here, but the game also explores Cortana's overexpended lifespan, which results in an AI insanity, rampancy, action, and emotion. It's the best of both worlds. And if I'm milking this imagery too much, God almighty, this was the reason I focused on her design over the years. It all led to this. It feels like peak gamer culture at the time to make a model this detailed, complete with bare feet. It's not like I'm against some TNA in my games. Have you seen the channel that you're on? It's just that her design being this developed sort of distracts from the actual story being told. But that also goes for Chief's armor. All of the Spartan armor got redesigned for Halo 4, and while the others look fine, I don't mind most of the Spartan 4's armor. Commander Palmer specifically looks cool as hell, but the Chief's looks flimsy and awkward. In an attempt to focus on the person under the suit, it makes the suit look like plastic, I'd rather that some variation of his Halo 3 look was kept intact here, at the very least until he meets up with the UNSC. Not because it's my favorite look for him, that honor goes to Halo 2, but because having him look so different amongst the other Spartans would have been a visual aid in telling 343's story of a man out of time. Ironically, considering what I'm about to say, Halo 4 is the most middle-of-the-ground story. I understand that 4 is a game that's a lot more time-sensitive than the others. Most Halo games take over the course of weeks, while 4's in-universe time is only 4 days, and the game clearly feels like that. From the moment Chief comes out of cryo, the game is constantly propelling you forward, and the sense of tension is palpable. And I like the idea of bringing in the Forerunners as the main focus. 343 wanted to integrate the extended universe into the main games, making it all feel more connected, and they decided to focus on the Forerunners, an ancient civilization responsible for the creation of the Halo rings that was only vaguely mentioned in previous games, while also hinting that they were humanity all along. And while I think their inclusion is cool, the Halo extended universe has always felt more confusing than other sci-fi franchises, man. There's thousands of years of lore, various civilizations and planets, most of which are buried in books with no on-screen representation whatsoever. If you like it, all the more power to you. But this has always been a series that's been good at offering straightforward reasons to keep the player invested without ever getting too deep in backstory. This is something that I'm not sure 4 does a good job of with its main objective, none of which is properly explained. Who the Didact is in relation to the Chief, or what any of this is on its own terms. A problem that would return in 343's later games. Not to mention that the Didact only shows up in like 2 cutscenes. Then there's the Librarian, who's a completely different character. Basically, the Didact is a fallen hero of sorts who now wants to destroy humanity, and that's a no-no. The Covenant are basically just cannon fodder at this point and are only included to offer a familiar enemy. The actual story is sort of bleh, although it does introduce some side characters like Lasky and Commander Palmer. And while they get good moments, mainly that one notable scene halfway through the game, they don't really get a lot of time to shine like past side characters did. Again, the Didact, the main villain, only gets like 2 scenes, and then he's killed in a fucking playable cutscene. However, surprisingly enough, the true intrinsic reason for the player to keep going, the driving force of Halo 4, is Chief and Cortana's connection. Yes, I'm finally getting to the point that I've been dancing around for half the video. When Chief comes out of cryo, Cortana seems off. She's glitching, her voice is different, and she begins to space out at times. And once Chief and Cortana land on the planet Requiem, she finally reveals that she has gone past her 7-year expiry date and has developed rampancy, a sort of AI equivalent to dementia, and the only cure is to deactivate her. Chief refuses to let that happen and plans on making it to Dr. Halsey, hoping that she can somehow restore Cortana to her former self. While it's set up as the B-plot, it's the clear emotional core of the game, and is the best part of Halo 4's narrative. Which is impressive considering that two-dimensional characters were sort of Halo's MO by this point. Yet 4 completely tosses that to the side. And reading that not only did the team not have confidence in this part of the game, but that it was almost scrapped entirely is insane. The idea of the story ever being told with voice actors other than Steve Downes and Jen Taylor would completely defeat the purpose of it. Halo 4 was the first time that the two were ever able to record their lines in the same room together, and you can tell when playing. The amount of attention and weight given to the story is easy to sense through the screen, both from the performances as well as the writing, given that the creative director Josh Holmes had a similar experience losing his mother to dementia. But it also feels like it's the culmination of everything we've seen so far. The world that Chief and Cortana step foot in at the beginning of the game is fundamentally different, both for them and us, the player. Cortana is truly the only person that we and the Chief are connected to that's left. Everyone else is dead or MIA. Bungie has left Halo behind, making way for an almost entirely new group of people to helm the series. So to immediately force us to grapple with the possibility of her death is both difficult and a brilliant way to start off a new era of Halo, and it's all in the execution. If we just heard Cortana's voice glitch a bit and called that rampancy, it wouldn't have worked. But we not only actively see and hear Cortana's degradation throughout the game, to the point where she's unrecognizable and even needs to be walked through a task, but we see how this affects the Chief. Taking someone like the Master Chief, a mechanically altered man who's been programmed for war since he was a boy, and forcing him to choose between his sole purpose for existence and the only person he really cares about is interesting. I think the Chief's character is surprisingly well written here. Joseph Staten and other writers at Bungie excelled at writing archetypes, only including just enough to keep the player invested in the power fantasy, which began to slowly chip away when stories like ODST and Reach delved a bit deeper into vulnerability and mortality. So instead of trying to backtrack and emulate early Master Chief, I appreciate that 343 decided to continue down that trail, allowing John 117 to explore emotions that we hadn't seen him deal with yet. Something that you could tell was a goal for the game with the cinematic reveal trailer, which consists of flashbacks of John's experiences in the Spartan program. The scene where Chief somewhat consoles Dr. Tilson before she has to abandon her home was great. And the scene right after her and all her colleagues are killed, only for the Chief to actively have to ignore his feelings and go back to the mission, was well executed. No pun intended. That iconic moment I mentioned earlier where Captain Del Rio orders the Chief to hand over Katana to be discarded, only for him to deny his orders for the first time in the series, was a big deal. It's one that felt earned. And the culmination of this story is Cortana's death at the end of the game, a moment that I thankfully wasn't aware of going into 4, and it's a moment that's incredibly well earned. The entire game builds up to it. I've talked before about how Halo has dealt with the topic of death positively and negatively, but effectively giving us an entire game to say goodbye to our best friend / confidant / life partner feels depressing. Especially for 2012, that's a very bold thing to do. And the game ending with the Chief's armor being removed, simply leaving us with the man underneath, gave me chills the first time I saw it. The only thing is, the actual game doesn't really reflect the story that's being told, since it just feels like more Halo, but sloppier. I mentioned that the opening levels were a close recreation of Combat Evolved. There's lots of that here. Obvious callbacks to what was, like the gondola section near the end that reminds me of Halo 2, or what I can only describe as weapons fan service, since all the previous stuff gets to return. The assault rifle, the battle rifle, and the DMR all return, despite the clear redundancy with new weapons like the saw. I guess 343's thought was, you're not going to use the weapons very often, so you might as well just put them all in there. It's hard to like the new enemy factions of the Prometheans. Conceptually, they're interesting. The Didact forcefully turns humans into subservient alien warriors. It's kinda cool. But in gameplay, they have no personality, and actually fighting them is a pain. Initially, I didn't agree with the complaint that Halo 4 just decided to throw enemies at you, until I replayed it and realized that not only is that true, the main issue is actually the Prometheans' combat. Crawlers are spawned in the dozens and are obnoxious due to their speed. Watchers are in the air and as a result are difficult to take out unless they're close range. But you better kill them fast because they can revive both knights and crawlers. Which is annoying since knights are the biggest pain in my ass. They're just a hemorrhoid centimeters from the hole. They can teleport, they summon shields, they lunge at you, and they have a one-hit melee kill, like an elite sword. On a normal difficulty, I would often recognize that I was just not having fun during combat with them. And I simply cannot imagine playing this on heroic or legendary and enjoying myself at the same time. Part of that is because a lot of the sections in Halo 4 feel less like sandboxes and more like long hallways with very little variation from playthrough to playthrough. Backtracking is almost impossible in most of Halo 4. Weapons will sometimes completely disappear if you set them down, preventing the player from juggling guns, which was a core part of Halo's formula in previous games. Each new chapter, you're automatically given a pistol and an assault rifle, even if there's no ammo available nearby. Even if the next mission is picking up right after the previous one left off. So if you strategically manage to save something for a later part of the game, too bad, you have to play it the way 343 wants you to. Especially since ammo is so sparse, you have to be agnostic towards any gun in the game unless you're a fan of the new Promethean weapons, and I am not, mostly because they're all just reskins of the UNSC weapons with less satisfying sounds. The problem of repetitive hallways is made worse by objectives that are commonly repeated as well. Destroy these generators, put Cortana into this terminal, all while looking at the same Forerunner architecture that very quickly turns from mesmerizing into monotonous. Halo 4 is still Halo. It still attempts to have some kind of sandbox, but it does, at times, feel like just another first-person shooter. The only mission that I could say I loved completely is Composer. It actually manages to capture that essence of Combat Evolved's first level much better than the actual mission attempting to adapt it. Of course, there are other missions with moments that work well, like Requiem or Infinity. But then there's a mission like Reclaimer, which should be this fun, massive open sandbox that allows the player to get to the objective however they see fit, a la the Arc from Halo 3, but even that is far too restricted, as if it isn't Halo and it's insert indiscriminate first-person military shooter. I get that this is the third video in the row that I'm saying this, but you just gotta hear me out at this point. ODST and Reach managed to do something new by focusing on different perspectives of soldiers lower on the totem pole than the chief by removing the typical power fantasy, both in the story and gameplay as well. Some can see comparisons to the Call of Duty or Battlefield franchises, hell, even I compared Reach and ODST to those games, but that's more so due to the focal point of playing as a standard soldier who doesn't get to save the world by the end. But I truly believe that 343 also decided to take inspiration from other contemporary first-person shooters, just without any sort of in-game context like Bungie had. And because of that, Halo 4 just feels like another FPS. A fine one, but not one that's very captivating outside of the franchise that it's set in. The set pieces are less wide-open areas that keep you engaged during a high-stakes moment, and more like, just push the left stick forward the whole time. The Ghost Run as an idea is a fun play on the classic Warthog run, but it goes on for a little bit too long, and you guessed it, it feels like you're driving down hallways. Traversing the crumbling terrain lacks complexity, and the destruction happening around you slowly becomes generic, rather than constantly pumping you up through the sequence. Flying the Pelican is great, I love how weighty it feels, and yet, it lasts for like 2 seconds. An entire ship was play tested and added in, only to be used for no longer than 5 minutes. And the flight right before the final mission should be great. The stakes are at an all-time high, Chief's new theme is blaring through the speakers, I'm ready to take down the Didact, except it is a section where only one hit can kill you, sort of shooting all that build-up in the foot. In 2012, the most popular games were the cinematic experiences. So within that context, moments like these set pieces or the quick sections where the chief has to climb up walls by holding the left stick make sense as an attempt to push the franchise into the future. Unfortunately for 343, these were never all that good, especially when you kill the Didact with a simple tap of RB in a quick time event. Main villain of the game, folks. I am so happy that this is the only time this is ever done in the entire franchise. I would much rather take a janky boss fight like with Tartarus at the end of 2 than ever have another bland quick time event. The attempt to bring in developers not familiar with Halo is a noble one. If franchises only hired people who love what's already been done and didn't hire people who have no interest in new things, nothing would grow, ever. But the direction that the end product took just sort of aimlessly adopted design sensibilities and mechanics from other contemporary shooters in an attempt to breathe life into the new Halo formula, while it just ended up watering it down. Which is a shame, because I do believe that iteration and evolution are important with game franchises, but at best, Halo 4 is a fine game that I could enjoy. At worst, it's a bland imitation. And it's really frustrating because there are great parts of Halo 4 that often get ignored. Like the soundtrack by Neil Davidge, who did a fine job creating a new sound for Halo. Chief's theme, 117 by Kazuma Jinuochi, is amazing. It's triumphant and immediately makes you feel like you're in the center of the universe whenever it plays. And the fact that it never returns in any other Halo game is an oversight that must be fixed. You're laughing, but my strongly worded letter is already on its way to Washington. Cortana's theme, aptly titled Green and Blue, is beautifully somber, and hearing it on the title screen made me all the more excited than any other promotional material ever could. It is one of the benefits of playing the original game over just playing the Master Chief Collection. It's a shame that these identifiable themes don't really get to play all that often in the campaign, which on one hand is disappointing, as both of these tracks are transcendent, but on the other, it allows their usage when they do show up in the game to be incredibly impactful. In one moment, Halo 4 will have an incredibly effective moment, like when the classic theme finally plays when Installation 3 shows up again, almost like a welcome home in a game full of new. But then the game will have something awful, like Spartan Ops. I promise this won't take long at all. Where ODST and Reach had firefight modes, a fun horde mode that could be played in both multiplayer and single player, Halo 4 decided to have an entire second campaign that takes place after the main story. And while it could have been about Sarah Palmer, giving the player a good chance to learn about this new character, or even about Fireteam Majestic, the team that we see in all of the cutscenes, you instead play as a nameless Spartan as a part of Fireteam Crimson, who doesn't talk. Gee, I wonder where they got that idea. I'm not a fan of hiding context and important story beats behind what is just another horde mode and calling it a campaign. As happy as I am to see extra game modes still intact 14 years later, from an era that was so focused on always online, Spartan Ops is asset reuse in the worst way. There's very little structure or design here. Almost all 50 missions are sandboxes chock full of massive amounts of enemies and vehicles, expecting the enjoyment to not come from the level design, but from playing it with friends. What could have been an interesting meld of single player and multiplayer ended up as a sort of aimless time killer that, for some reason, decided to withhold important information for the next mainline game. Thanks, I hate it. I think it's easy to dislike Halo 4, not only due to its own mistakes, but the circumstances it was made under. I should know. The first few drafts of this video were a lot less charitable and contained a harsher characterization of my opinions surrounding my experience. Suffice it to say, I wrote a bunch of scripts where I called the game a piece of shit. It's clear that 343 had a lot of growing pains going into 4's development that was only compounded by the short dev cycle. Despite all of that, there is still stuff here that I love. From the more personal story to the music, the technical graphical presentation, new characters, as well as a general sense that 343 has some direction of where to take the franchise. However, when you really look at Halo 4, you see a game that was built under stress with not a lot of time given to iron out the problems. When Bungie had 2 years to make a Halo game, they were just making a game, and it was a studio that had existed long before the Master Chief was even a thought in their head. When 343 has 2 years to make a Halo game, it's like cramming an entire fish into a sardine can. Maybe if 4 was instead an Xbox One launch title, it would have been given more time and better hardware to allow the game to be more open, aligning with earlier builds of levels found on 360 dev kits. But it's too easy to get lost in what could have been. Regardless of its faults, Halo 4 was the mark of a new era for the franchise, one that gave fans, both new and old, a sense of what's to come. Only for it all to come down crashing and burning.